For our next chapter, we are going to be discussing and covering simple and compound interest, but I'm breaking it down in two parts. We're going to first cover simple interest first. Before we get started with simple interest, we just got done dealing with percents, and you guys were pretty much using your calculators to convert your percents into decimals. So we need to get used to actually doing this in our heads. It's actually fairly simple. So if you remember, we're always dividing by 100, and if you remember from a while ago how to actually convert and just move a decimal when dividing by 100, and you're going to be dividing by 100 every single time. So 50% can be represented as 50 over 100. Okay, so right now our decimal point is right here. So if we are dividing by 100, which is 2 tens, so I'm basically going to move my decimal to the left 2 places. So then our answer, 50%, is actually 0.50. Okay, this is actually a fairly simple process. So if you already know what you're doing, just go ahead and complete your notes on the paper, then move on to the next slide. Otherwise, I'll continue to talk through and discuss until you get it. 13%. So again, move that decimal twice. You end up with 0.13. The single digits can be a little tricky because people forget to put in that extra 0 at the beginning, like right here. So this would be 0.04. 2.75. Sometimes the extra digit with the decimal in the middle of the number throws people off. So we're still going to move it to the left twice and add that 0 in the front. So we get 0.0275. This one's pretty easy, but your decimal is going to end up in the middle of the number. And then last but not least, move it over twice, add that 0. And the reason why we're moving it left is because we're dividing by 100 every single time. That should be very easy for you. It should become something that you should be used to all the time, because we as adults use it all the time, and we're able to do it mentally. If you have any other questions, go ahead and ask me, okay? And then I'll make sure we need to make sure we get this and understand it before we actually move on. So if you have questions, please ask me. Okay, at the bottom of your notes is the formula in which we are going to use to calculate simple interest. So fill in the bubbles with the appropriate definition. So I is going to be your interest. P is going to be your principal amount of money invested or borrowed. R, I already wrote in for you. That's your annual interest rate. Okay? Remember rate. We got to convert it to a decimal. And then notice that your time is in years. Okay? So you will have several calculations that will not be in years. So we have to make sure we watch out for that. Below your model, you need to write down the definition for simple interest. Pause your screen and quickly write down the definition, and then push play when you're ready to go. At the bottom, open up your notes to example 1. We have 2 problems that we're going to talk through and discuss to make sure you understand the procedures. So if we have a problem with $1,000, which has the rate of 4.5%, and the time is 2 years. Automatically off the top of your head, you should be able to know what 4.5% is as a decimal. And it should be easy for you. So when you write in the formula, you won't have to do any work in your calculator. So the first step is to using the formula, which is I equals P times R times T. Next, you need to substitute. So even though in your notes right here it says all this stuff in blue, this is basically just substitution. So it's fine if you put in your notes substitution. So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply 1,000 times 0.045, because remember it's that rate converted into a decimal, and then times 2 years. So once you multiply, this is where you can use your calculator. Just quickly multiply the three numbers together and you will get your interest rate, which is $90. So pretty much if you were to deposit or put in the bank $1,000 and leave it alone for 2 years, and that bank agrees to give you money at that interest rate of 4.5%, you will earn $90 in 2 years. All right, let's do the next one. $2,500 at 6.75% for 3 years. Again, 6.75% is what is a decimal. So once you figure that out, then all you have to do is put in your calculator those three numbers to multiply together. So in your notes, write down the formula, I equals P times R times T. Substitute the numbers, and then in your calculator, multiply all three numbers together and simplify to get $506.25, which is the simple interest after 3 years. Okay, pause your screen, do these two examples in your notes. Once you're done, press play to find the answers. Okay, so for 1A, you should have gotten $540 as your simple interest earned, and for 1B, you should have gotten $170 as your simple interest earned. If you're struggling with this, please come and ask for help. I would be glad to help you. Otherwise, let's move on to more difficult problem. Okay, now this problem deals with, well, what if you're given the information for the interest rate and you have to find either the P or the R or the T? Okay, so we're still going to use substitution and we're still going to use the formula. So if you take and read about Mr. Gabble, he borrowed $1,860 to buy a computer. Okay, he will pay $71.30 per month for 30 months. Find the simple interest rate for his loan. So in this case, we're finding R. So we should know I, P, and T. However, you actually have to find I first because it tells you how much he borrowed. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to multiply $71.30 times 30 months to figure out how much he is going to pay. That gives you $2,139. Well, that's not what he's borrowing. So what you have to do now is find the difference between the two in order to find the interest. So if he borrowed $1,000 and $1,860, but yet he paid $2,139, then obviously that $279 was the interest in which he had to pay. So that is going to be our I, okay, when we do the substitution. All right, so, and then here's what I told you to look out for, the 30 months, okay? It's not represented in years, so you actually have to convert it into years, which is 2.5 years, okay? So T is going to equal 2.5, not 30. Now, write down the formula, I equals P times R times T. This time, I is what we know. We found that before, so put 279 in that place. So that equals $1,860, which with what he started off with. We need to find R, so leave R alone, and then substitute 2.5 in place of T. Simplify as far as you can, so that 1,860 times 2.5 gives you 4,650. Notice how R is still R. So now all we have to do is divide. Once you divide, that gives you a decimal. That decimal is your rate. So now just turn that decimal back into a percent by multiplying it by 100. Okay, so turning it into a percent, you're multiplying by 100. Okay, if this was pretty hard for you to grasp, it's all right. All right, we will get more practice with it later. Otherwise, let's try to do number 2. So I'm going to help you set this up so you understand the formula. In this circumstance, you have $9.20 as your interest rate, but that's your interest rate each month. You have to calculate that interest rate for 5 years. So again, the little bit of math that we have to do before we actually substitute within the problem, we're going to find $9.20 for 12 months for 5 years. Okay, because 12 months are in a year. So we're going to take 9.2 times 12 times 5. Well, 12 times 5 is 60. So in your calculator, all you have to do is 9.2 times 60, and you get 552. So this number right here is going to be our I. Okay, coming back over to the formula. Substitute 552. Our principal amount is the $2,400. We don't know what R is, so leave it as R. And the time is 5 years. Let's simplify as far as we can. On the right-hand side, we can actually multiply the 2,400 and the 5. So use your calculator for that. And then the only thing left to do is to get R all by itself by dividing both sides by 12,000. And that is correct because we want a decimal as our answer. So dividing a small number by a big number will give us a decimal. So R is going to be 0.046, but if you multiply that by 100, you get 4.6% as the rate.